y'all stand, we'll have the invocation.
Heavenly Father, we'd like to thank you for this opportunity to serve. Lord God, we ask you to come into this room and give us the wisdom and the knowledge that we need to lead the city in the direction that we need to go. We ask you to forgive us for our sins. In your Son, Jesus' name, we pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Call the roll, please. I'm sorry.
Commissioner Vaughn,
Present.
Commissioner Milliken,
Here.
Commissioner Furter,
Present.
Commissioner Brown, Mayor Forster.
Here. City Attorney's report.
The minutes have been read and approved.
Thank you. Municipal Order 2012-147, approval of the minutes of a special call meeting held on Tuesday, December the 18th, 2012. I need a motion to accept the minutes.
So moved.
Motion by Bill, I need a second.
Second.
Second by David. Call the roll, please.
Commissioner Vaughn,
Yes.
Commissioner Milliken.
Yes.
Commissioner Furter,
Yes.
and Mayor Forster.
Yes. Municipal Order 2013-05, approval of the minutes of a special call meeting held on Tuesday, January the 8th, 2013. Entertain a motion to accept the minutes.
So moved.
Motion made by David, I need a second.
Second.
Second. Call the roll, please.
Commissioner Vaughn,
Yes.
Commissioner Milliken.
Yes.
Commissioner Furter,
Yes.
Mayor Forster.
Yes. Okay. I hate to go into this wastewater part without Martha here, but no, no, okay. All right. Wastewater treatment plan update from Neil Hall from CTI.
I'm not Neil, no. I'm gonna explain to you why he's here.
Okay.
Of course, as you know, this wastewater is the ongoing saga with our wastewater plant, and Neil's here to talk to you tonight about, some more of our options. We've dealt with EPA on this for about 3 years now. We're under that agreed order, and then they take it off, and Neil and I are under the assumption and almost assured that we're fixing to have another one before too long, so what we're trying to do is
When you
head some
say
of that
that, you
off.
mean agreed order, correct?
Yeah, we're
Okay.
trying to head off another agreed order, which I don't know that we can head it off, but we can be ahead of the game, and with the support of y'all, we've done that in the past, and that's what we'd like to do again. So I've got Neil here to explain to you about some of the actions that we took before and some that we think we need to go ahead and take again to, try to get the information to you folks and to the state about what we think we're gonna have to do and work with them to try to get to a point where we can be in compliance on our permit. So I'm not gonna muddy the water a whole lot with you. I'll let Neil explain what he's got to, and then if you have any questions, then I'll be happy to answer them.
Okay, thanks. Okay, Neil.
So Bubba's gonna let me muddy my own
You're
water.
gonna study your own water.
You know, I really appreciate you all having me here tonight, and there's 2 or 3 things I wanted to talk with you about. I'd like to give you a little bit of background, but at the same time, I don't want to waste your time. I don't want to stand up here and talk, and you all have other things you need to go on to. So let me just give you a little bit of an overview, and then you ask me what you need to know that I don't tell you.
Okay.
Your wastewater plant has had problems for a number of years, and we've attempted over time to alleviate some of these problems. One of the things we've tried to do is to do the fixes that we've done in such a way that it doesn't cost Fulton a great deal of money. And we've tried some things that we knew were experimental, that we hoped would fix it, and they've not. What they have done is they bought you some time. You know, you've been able to sort of slide along. So about 3 years ago, the state put you under an agreed order. Your agreed order was based on noncompliance with your NPDES permit, and we prepared a corrective action plan for you at that point. Now, the agreed order had some other things in it other than just the corrective action plan. That's one of the reasons we're attempting to be proactive now instead of reactive. If we wait for the agreed order, it's likely to have some requirements in it that frankly for Fulton are not money well spent. It's probably better than saying a waste of money, isn't it? We don't want to spend your money doing things that don't bring results for you. And if you received a notice of violation from the state in October, normally that would then place you into the enforcement division within the department. At some point, we expect in the near future for you to receive a show cause letter that would say, come to Frankfurt and show why you're not meeting the requirements. Well, what we'd like to do is to get ahead of that. And we may not be able to. It may be that if you authorize me tonight to go do the work that I'm going to propose that you do, then you may get that order tomorrow. You may get that show cause letter tomorrow. But if we can get ahead of it, it may be money well spent. It's money that I think is going to be spent, whether you do it now or whether you wait for the state to tell you to do it. Just that if you wait for the state to tell you to do it, it may cost more because they'll have other requirements. One of the things that we did when we did the corrective action plan in 2009, and I think this was what, I don't remember if Joe Bishop came up here prior to developing this corrective action plan, or if he already had the corrective action plan drafted and he came up here to discuss it with you. But that was when Joe came the last time. We prepared this corrective action plan and we looked at a number of different alternatives. And the lowest cost alternative was to install the ultrasonic generators in the wastewater lagoon. Those were installed, and then the following year a few more were installed. And we've gotten mixed results from them. It appears that the ultrasonic generators sometimes lower the suspended solids, which is what your violation is mostly made up of. But they do not consistently lower the total suspended solids. Also during this time, the operation of the lagoon was revised somewhat. Over the past year, Mr. Nelms has attempted to use a biocatalyst, again, to further reduce the total suspended solids and BOD, again, without consistent results. Also included in the corrective action plan were some improvements to the wastewater treatment plant and investigation and rehabilitation in your collection system. Now, over the past few years, we did the investigation into the sewer system. We narrowed down the problem areas to 4 drainage basins, and then you all undertook a $500,000 project to eliminate this extraneous flow from getting into the system, but that does nothing at the plant. During the construction of that rehab project, quite unexpectedly, the state issued a letter that lifted your agreed order. We didn't want to wake a sleeping bear, we never asked.
That was my question.
We don't know. We don't know, but you received a letter during the winter last year, I think it was February of 2012, and your order was simply lifted. February 2012, just the order was lifted. So at that point, Mr. Nelms had some FEMA money that was going to do some repair to the berms of the lagoons. So the other money, the other project that was included in the corrective action plan to do some other repairs at the lagoons, we have not done. We just put that on hold, and he should be congratulated because he took the money that you all received from FEMA and repaired the entire inner berm on the lagoon, which was in bad shape. Now, you have a much longer, lower berm that goes around the entire perimeter of the lagoon. It also needs to be repaired, but it's not been done. What we would like to do is we would like to undertake with you to produce another corrective action plan. And this corrective action plan would address eliminating the excess total suspended solids at the wastewater treatment plant. It would also look at your other effluent criteria and see if any of those need further assistance. In addition, we will attempt to find out what your next NPDES permit limits are going to be and try to place you in a position so that you are ahead of that permit, which will be due to be issued year after next. So what we've proposed is another corrective action plan. We undertook the corrective action plan 3 years ago for $25,000 lump sum. I have looked back at our accounting for that corrective action plan, and it was priced correctly. What we propose this time is to undertake another corrective action plan, $25,000 hourly fee, not a lump sum. This way, if we can use part of the information that's available from the last corrective action plan and not have to start from scratch, we will then use that information to try to lower that cost. Since it's an hourly fee, what we're telling you is that we would not charge more than $25,000. We would charge you hourly based on actual work performed. When the Division of Water sent the notice of violation in October, we issued what I refer to as a plea letter to Vince Priddle in the Division of Water, asking for grace, essentially. Not denying the violations occurred. In fact, in his notice of violation, he indicated that for the 6 months prior to the notice of violation, the total suspended solids number had been exceeded. You all have two requirements on total suspended solids. One is to reduce them down to below 30 parts per million, and the other requirement is to eliminate 85% of what comes in the influent. Unfortunately, you had been able to do neither. So again, what we propose is to develop a corrective action plan that would look at some of the same alternatives we looked at last time, but we chose not to go because of the cost. You know, I wish I had good news for you. What I foresee happening, and I don't see how we can get around this, is that the city of Fulton is likely to spend somewhere in excess of $1 million to meet the state's requirements for your wastewater treatment plant. Most of the processes that we looked at before are approaching that number. If we then take into account that the infrastructure itself at the lagoon system needs to be upgraded and repaired, I think you're looking at a serious amount of money to be spent out there to accomplish compliance with your NPDES permit and then to maintain compliance into your next permit, which will last for 5 more years.
I think we have a choice.
We haven't come up with an alternative, you know. And the president of my company is a man named Gary Cosby, and Gary is one of the best, maybe the best wastewater engineer that I know. And I've discussed it with Gary, and he and I have kicked ideas back and forth, and we just can't come up with something that is not capital intensive. It's just gonna require money to make your treatment plant produce an effluent that's acceptable to the state of Kentucky. That's sort of the 5-minute version. And if you've got any questions that you want me to address, I'll be happy to address any question you want me to have. I brought some information with me, some of it's in my memory, and if I don't know the answer, I'll tell you, I'll get back to you when I look it up.
So what you're asking is for us to, you wanna work on a corrective action plan? Is that correct?
There are 2 copies of an agreement attached to the original letter that you have. Everybody else just has a
Yeah,
copy.
okay.
I would request that you sign and date both copies keep one copy for yourself, give me the other, and put us to work on a corrective action plan. That's exactly
As
right.
soon as possible.
I believe the sooner the better, yes, ma'am.
Mr. Hawk, excuse my ignorance, but it seems like we're always shooting at a moving target, and it always goes up. Once we do this, are we apt to be good for the next 50 years, or what do you think?
No, I don't think you would be.
10 maybe.
Our,
Change again next permit.
you know, our crystal ball, just takes really strong batteries that we don't have. We do the best we can with predicting what the future will be. And treatment-wise, the state works with us in predicting what their requirements are gonna be. But when you're issued a permit, it's only good for 5 years.
And I take it that they're not gonna reduce those levels, but
They will never
are they
reduce them.
routinely going to do that annually? or-
No, they will always get more stringent.
And is that a technically based issue, or is it, I mean, are our standards changing that much from on high somewhere that we just keep going up and up and up, or?
It's driven by the Environmental Protection Agency, and,
Of course, that's enough.
That's enough.
you know, the Environmental Protection Agency directs Kentucky,
Yeah.
and then Kentucky directs Fulton.
Right.
And so, in the land sakes, it's coming up on 40 years. In the 40 years that I've been involved in this work, there are few, if any, requirements that I've seen go down. They're always more stringent, both in drinking water and in wastewater.
Well, that only makes sense. I mean, that's,
Yeah, I agree, I understand.
As development occurs, our streams become more and more degraded as our population grows, and as our streams become more degraded, then the wastewater that's placed into them has to be cleaner in order to not further degrade those streams, and so the requirements always get more stringent.
Why do we need another corrective action plan? Just, I mean, because I thought what we said before is if the sonic whatevers didn't work and it seemed like there was something else, blah, 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 I don't remember.
Yeah,
That we were gonna move on to the, I mean, just,
There are a number of alternatives considered in the last corrective action plan, and,
are those not viable alternatives? I mean, I think it's kind of what Lisa's, some of the other, I mean, didn't we have like a,
free water surface constructed
Yeah,
wetland.
we have the old plan that he's talking about.
exactly, but none of that, I mean, I thought like what was the, not refuge, but what's the word I'm looking
The
for?
estuary type.
Exactly, it was gonna be like $1 million or so years ago, right? I
Right.
mean, and correct me if I'm wrong, didn't we spend like $500,000 or something, or
Yeah,
nearing that with the sonic generators, and then we've had a lot of, unforeseen weather issues that may or may not have had a big effect on.
Right. Yeah, and that's the problem, we could, with our ultrasonic generators at best, we could meet it part of the time. The problem is it's not consistent enough. It show results and show good results
Absolutely.
part of the time. But due to weather factors and climate changes and all the other things going on, there's no way that we could prove to the state that we can use them to hold that monitoring report to where it has to be for us to be compliant.
The ultrasonic generators cost somewhere in the neighborhood of $100,000. So they were sort of a fractional value of what these other alternatives were. The other alternatives that were considered were a free water surface constructed wetland,
Wetland, that's the word I was looking for.
dissolved
Okay.
air flotation thickener, intermittent sand filter, and submerged rock filter.
Okay, you got me on those now, but I just remember the wetlands, so.
Well, the problem that we have with the wetland, and one of the reasons we'd like to do, another corrective action plan is I have become convinced that the free water surface constructed wetland is too risky to undertake. And the reason I consider it risky to undertake is that there are a limited number of these in operation. And in order to place one in operation in Fulton, you must take away your 30-acre cell from your lagoon. If this is risky, I would have nothing to fall back on if I've taken away, you would have nothing to fall back on if we've taken away the 30-acre cell. That is then further compounded with how can you construct this 30-acre constructed wetland while you have a 30-acre lagoon in operation. And so I think that needs a harder look. I'm not sure that that alternative is going to be the best alternative. Then the other factor in why we need to do another corrective action plan is we have 3.5 years additional data from your wastewater treatment plant that we need to analyze in order to see that we're doing the right thing. Engineers are conservative. We want to look at what your effluent has been, what your flows have been, and then use as much of this as we can. That's why I'm proposing the second one on an hourly rate rather than a lump sum. Because I think we can use some of this information that was developed with this. I just don't think we can take this corrective action plan and go forward with it after 3.5 years' time.
Well, if I remember correctly, Joe mentioned that he thought that the wetland was the way to go. Now, I really appreciate the fact that, you used words, and I was writing them down, that maybe well spent and other things like that, but you just said you were convinced that wetland is not what we need. And I like to hear, I know a lot of this is subjective, and it's not trial and error, but it could help us or whatever else.
I'd like to say something that I don't know how to say really.
Just say it.
Diplomatically, I suppose. Joe and I worked together for a long time, and Joe and I disagreed with each other for a long time.
Good.
So I never just stood beside Joe and nodded. But then, as Joe worked with the city of Fulton, he had a special relationship with this city. And one of the things Joe worked into was attempting to do anything he could to keep your costs down, knowing your financial situation. In this case, I don't think it's the best thing for Fulton. But he went over and beyond to attempt to keep your local cost as low as he could.
Yes, it is.
And back in the day, Mr. Bishop and Mr. Tidwell worked together to control some of these things that maybe now, I'm not gonna say they're gonna cost you more money, but maybe now you've gotta spend the money that you didn't have to then. Again, this bought you time. You've been able to delay taking this, unfortunately, big lick. But in talking with in my own thought processes, and then in talking with Gary Cosby about the best process to propose in Fulton, without looking at numbers, just looking at what we know about the processes, he and I agree that the constructed wetland is risky. I guess that's the point more than, it could work and it could save you some money, but there's a risk involved that I'm not sure we should advise you to take.
We need to calculate the risk, and I appreciate the fact that you're saying that, because, I feel like that when we went with the sonic generators years ago, I know there was some risk involved, but you know what? It was worth, it saved us a bunch of money. I was a big fan, of Mr. Bishop. He always treated the city of Fulton right, and he took us out to the lagoon, and we rode around with him, and he explained every bit of it to somebody who had no clue what was going on out there, and I left that meeting having a lot more knowledge of it than I did.
Well, I'll tell you right up front, there's no bigger fan of Joe's than I am.
Okay.
I didn't mean anything I said.
No,
I
absolutely not. I'm a straight shooter myself, and that's what
But he and I would disagree, and then, we worked together to find the right solution. Sometimes the right solution was what Joe said. It was like, Neil, go do it. I said, yes, sir. And so I did. And now at this point, I guess, since you took that risk and it's not proved out, I don't want you to take another one that might not prove out as well.
And
That one was a
regard-
relatively low-cost risk. This next one is a much higher cost, and there's no going backwards once that lagoon is committed.
But at least bought us some time
Absolutely.
not nominal fee, but at a, you know, we did okay with that. I mean, we got by for a while with what we spent, and it worked. It
Oh,
worked
and you
for
know,
a
if
year.
you go back, if you go back, you've been buying time for about 20 years.
That's right, you're exactly right.
And you've bought a lot of time.
I was just gonna say a couple of points, and respectfully, Mr. Hall, what I'm hearing you say is you believe, obviously you believe that, the constructed wetland is too risky. I have a little bit of experience with constructed wetlands, and I'm not sure I've heard any data that supports your fear. But that's not to say that it's not there. We don't have time to look at the
And,
research.
and it's not as much as, let's just take the constructed wetlands and throw it out,
Okay.
as it is, let's take the constructed wetland and look at it more closely.
Okay, based on,
Based on how it could be done and keep your lagoon in operation, based on today's costs instead of costs 3.5 years ago, based on what other constructed wetlands are seeing. You know, I know there's one in Mayfield,
right.
and I'm not sure if it's a free water surface constructed wetlands, or if it's the constructed wetlands that's intermittently inundated. Don't know which one that one is.
I guess what I'm suggesting is that, I don't doubt what you're saying. I wish I knew more than what you're able to tell us this evening about the data and about what they are doing actually in terms of performance. The other issue that bothers, that's a great mystery to me, is the fact that the state in all of its wisdom just lifted the agreed to order. So, is that a good thing or is that a bad thing?
Well, you don't go back and ask, do you?
Well, that's my question.
Yeah.
Is it a good
You
thing?
know,
I don't know.
I'd hate to spend,
If we're not under agreed order.
if we're not agreed to order and
So
so
I
it's a
know we'll
roll
have
of
to
the
do it at some
dice.
point, but.
You can wait, don't get this story started that we can't wait, we can wait, but Neil and I agree with all the past experience that it's coming, we don't have a choice. We can't meet the permit, and if we can't meet the permit, then we're gonna be under an
And
agreement.
I'm all for being proactive. I mean, everything we've done in the city, a lot of the stuff that's been done in the past has been reactive, and I think we've, you know,
And I think that's why the agreed order ended up lifted, was because we spent $500 million on the wastewater system, and because we had a corrective action plan in place when they asked us to, we followed every step that they asked and then some. We completed the work they asked us, we did the studies they asked, we given the information they asked for, and with the help of Neil and them, we had a step ahead of them, and I think that's the only reason our agreed order was lifted, was that we were a step ahead of them, and that's what we're trying to do now, is to keep that step ahead of them. I mean, we can wait, we can just sit and wait, but
Absolutely.
I'm just almost assured that we're gonna have to go to Frankfurt on the show cause hearing, and it will be, I'm gonna say in the next few months, because they haven't conveyed anything to us since we sent them the letter asking for some time. So I'm assuming it's in the process, it's going through the mill, and when it gets to the Office of Enforcement, they're gonna kick it back to us and have us come to Frankfurt and explain to them why we can't meet our permit. I mean, we're just trying to get ahead of that, and this is the discussion we wanted to have tonight, because I wanna make sure that everybody understands why we wanna go and be aggressive instead of being reactive. I wanna be proactive.
And Bubba's exactly right. In the agreement that I presented to you tonight, it's perfectly within your right to say, we'll just hold and see what the state does. We see that the state is going to follow the notice of violation with a show cause meeting. When you have a show cause meeting, then they're going to follow that with an order. They may still do that. We may be too late to get ahead of it. I may be back here in a month or two saying, there's all these other requirements inside this agreed order that you all need to pay me to do for you. but we'd like to forego some of the things that we don't think would serve you well. What we see happen, and there was only a touch of this in your last agreed order, but what we see happen in Tennessee with these agreed orders, whether they're commissioner's orders or director's orders or agreed orders, is they put something in the order that's known as CMOM. Capacity Maintenance Operation and Management. It's a program that was invented by a man in Region 4 EPA about 12 years ago. And it deals with every aspect of the operation of your wastewater system, building on what they interpret in your MPDES permit as the best management practices. Most of the elements of the CMOM program might apply to a large city. Few of the elements can be reasonably applied to a city the size of Fulton. But if you have those CMOM elements stuck in an order, you have to build every one of those program elements, even though you really will never get any benefit from having them. It's a document that is filed away, put on a shelf, and as far as I'm concerned, it's a waste of your money to develop it. But if it's in the order, if you get the order and it's got the CMOM elements in it, then you have to go through that entire process, which can be rather expensive. And if we could do a corrective action plan and present it to the state and say, hey, we got a notice of violation, this is what we're gonna do about it.
And hopefully avoid those.
Hopefully avoid the order, and the order, if you avoid the order, then you don't have the deadlines that are associated with the order. So doing this now gives you a whole lot more freedom than waiting for the state to say, go do, and you have to have it done in 18 months, 2 years, whatever they say. Plus, if and when you get an order, it will, without doubt, have penalties involved in it. It will have civil penalties for the violations. And then it will have stipulated fines for the deadlines that you have to meet. And if you don't meet them, then you hit those deadlines and you get to pay those penalties as well. We're just trying to avoid some of those things. May not be successful, but we're on our way to trying to.
Well, I don't think we have a choice, David. We've got to get a corrective action plan going before they come down on us.
And again, we've set this up as an hourly fee rather than a lump sum, and if we can save you all money and use this, we'll use as much of this information we can. If we can produce it for less than $25,000, we'll produce it for less than $25,000.
Okay. Do we need a municipal order?
Municipal Order 2013-08.
2013-08.
How long, Mr. Hall, does it take to develop one of these plans?
I should have looked at the last one. I think we probably did the last one in about 90 days.
Okay.
I would propose that we do this one in a much more rapid time frame since we're trying to beat the state. I'd say 30 to 45 days, we'll try to have you a draft document to consider.
What happens if the state sends a show cause letter before you complete this?
I'm convinced that if the state calls us to Frankfurt and there's any order involved, item number 1 or 2 in that order is going to be a corrective action plan on your wastewater treatment plant. You can call it by another name. You could call it a preliminary engineering report, but you are going to have to address the reason your wastewater treatment plant fails to meet its effluent limits.
Will they take into consideration that we've already started this, just hadn't completed it? That's what I'm asking.
That's what I'm hoping. That's my hope as well as yours. We're underway.
No.
Better to have it started.
Better to have it started than not.
Okay.
Okay, municipal order 2013-08.
Well, let
I'm
me ask
sorry,
one other
okay.
question, if I may. It relates to what Commissioner Val is saying.
Who?
I'm sorry, Commissioner Val.
Why is this slap in the face?
I didn't intend for it to be that way. If we develop this corrective action plan, and then we get an agreed to order anyway, do we do another agreed to plan?
No, this corrective
Do
action
we do another
plan,
corrective action plan?
this corrective action plan will address anything that their order would have in it for your wastewater treatment plant. Now, if the order has a corrective action plan that's required for your sewage collection system, then this one won't include that, but it'll include anything that is required of this nature for your wastewater plant.
It may be a cost more than 25,000 if in fact that,
Absolutely,
you know, that's what it asks for or something, but okay.
absolutely.
But at least we're heading the right direction.
If they were to tell you that you had to add in the CMOM elements or something like that, all that's outside the scope of what we're proposing here. That'd be additional services.
But you're thinking that the majority, if we do this, when this agreed order comes down, we're gonna have to have a corrective action plan in place anyway, and that this will actually should not suffice, but somewhat
It will
suffice.
suffice for the needs of your wastewater plant.
Okay.
And if we can get this to them before the agreed order
We may
is
be in a good
generated,
shape.
or the show cause hearing, or if we go to the show cause hearing and lay the corrective action plan down and say, this is what we intend to do, then maybe we forego getting
One
the
step
order.
ahead.
Yeah,
Not getting the order is
Yeah.
really our goal here.
yeah,
Because that gives you the flexibility of addressing this more in your time than their time. You know, I mentioned the $1 million plus. You would rather spend $1 million in your time frame than in the state of Kentucky's time frame.
One thing Neil did mention that I just wanna make sure you understand too, is we're gonna request the parameters on our next permit, and what we wanna do in this corrective action plan is make sure that we can cover the parameters that are on the next permit. That will get us into the 7 or 8 year frame. And once we start talking to them about that, they're gonna change our permit. We already know they're gonna ask for at least one more parameter on phosphorus, so we know that that's coming anyway, so.
But we won't know those parameters, we're gonna be guessing at those.
No,
parameters.
we're gonna try to get
We're
the
going
state
to
to
work
give
with
us
the
a-
state to find out what the limits are likely to be.
Likely to be, though, we won't know.
Now, they won't give us
Okay.
guarantees, but they'll tell us where your limits are likely to be.
Okay,
And then this corrective action plan is going to attempt to address those as well.
okay.
So instead of 2 years, we're looking 7 years on effluent requirements.
are there other cities in the state of Kentucky that's having this problem also?
Yes. I can say that without knowing it. Yes, ma'am. In Tennessee, which I know a fair amount of more cities, I know more cities situation in Tennessee than Kentucky. There are close to 100 cities under orders of one kind or another,
Okay.
including the city of Nashville.
Oh, my goodness.
I believe they've committed somewhere between $200 and $500 million to correct their problems.
Mm.
Covered, we got the money.
Not in my budget.
Whose budget is it in?
Not $1 million.
Have a fish
It's in my
fry.
budget.
You talking about the $1 million?
I'm talking about the 25 to begin with.
25,000?
I assume if we go to $1 million, we're either gonna punt or get a grant, one or the other.
Well, we'll either, I mean, we've made applications with the Kentucky Infrastructure Authority to rehab that plant for years, and we have it on the books, we have that information readily available, and we are on the list. But, as far as getting that grant money, I'm not expecting it. We'll either have to, go to a revolving loan fund, or we'll have to go somewhere, we'll have to borrow the money, no doubt in my mind.
What about the 25? I assume Mr. Hall wants paid, so if we do this, the 25,000.
We'd have to have some creative accounting.
Surely you could wait 180 days or so before you get paid.
Yeah. Well, Lisa?
It's in reserves.
Okay.
We've got the money,
Yeah.
it's just if the budget would not be
Yeah.
able to.
Yeah,
It's not other than that you don't have anywhere else.
Yeah.
No, not that I know of, Bubba, you got to slow.
Well, I mean, we have maintenance to the system, but if I spend it on him, then we're gonna be,
Right.
yeah, shooting in
Well,
the.
we would do our best to do it within the budget that we have been given. I mean, that's the best we can do. If we can't, then we got reserves that would have to amend the budget.
and it's not- I mean, I just don't see another way around it right at this point in time.
No, I don't either.
Yeah, okay, yeah, I know what you're,
Yeah, I'm
okay.
just trying to ask the questions that I need to ask.
Sure.
I mean, if we do it, then obviously we're gonna have to pay for it.
Sure.
Pay the gentleman, and if we have the money, if we don't have the money, I grew up, if you don't have the money, you don't do it, so that's where what I'm sitting.
I understand. I understand, but we do have it reserved if that's where that's coming from. Okay. Municipal order 2013-08 that we enter into agreement with CTI engineers to provide us with a corrective action plan for our wastewater plant. I need a motion.
So moved.
Motion by Jeff, I need a second.
I'll second.
Second by David, is there any further discussion? Call the roll, please.
Commissioner Bond?
Yes.
Commissioner Milliken?
No,
Commissioner Free?
Yes.
And Mayor Forster?
Yes. Okay, now, you want me to sign,
If you would, please sign and date both copies and just give me back one. And then I would like to say something else in addition to thank you very much for allowing us to do this work for you and to continue to work for Fulton. You know that when I complete this corrective action plan, it's going to recommend that the city of Fulton spend a significant amount of capital to perform improvements to your wastewater treatment plant. As you think about your sewer rates across the city, you might keep that in mind.
what's the date, 28? How many copies you want me to sign?
There's two copies. If you'll sign both, then you keep a copy, I'll take a copy. That signed copy will serve as our notice to proceed to produce this work. I will book it with our accounting department tomorrow, and we'll get to work on this. First thing to do is to take all the sampling and discharge monitor reports that Bubba has been collecting and giving us for the last 3 years. And
You keep both copies?
I just need one, you keep one. One's for the city, one's for me. And then we'll begin to assemble preliminary costs on some of these alternatives, look at, and look very hard at which ones have the potential to serve you best and give you assurance of meeting your requirements. And hopefully in a month or 6 weeks, I can come back and present the corrective action plan to you, at least as a draft document, so that you all can have input into it and what we're doing and where we're going with it.
Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you very much.
thank you, Mr. Tom. Thank you very much.
Okay. Next on the agenda is budget review. Is there anything that's,
It's looking okay.
it wasn't looking okay, it was.
Oh.
Is there anything that,
I mean, nothing we didn't expect, I mean, everything
Okay.
other than that.
okay.
TD's at 54.9%.
Uh,
TD's at 54.9% of the
Yeah.
budget.
Yeah.
yeah. anything you want to comment on, Cub?
I know Cub and Lisa are doing this, we've talked
Mhm.
about it and talked about it. In view of our current discussion
Yeah.
with Mr. Hall, I do hope that, and I know that we'll continue to look at everything in the world in terms of looking at our expenses. And I know you are. Again, I would be interested at some point in learning more about this whole business of insurance and benefits that we pay through the state. I'd just like to know more about that if we could. It seems to me that I don't question the need for good benefits. That's not my point. My point is what are we getting for what we're paying? That's all I'd like to know. Thank you, Cub, and for what you're doing, Lisa, what you're doing.
Okay, number 5, voucher review. Is there anything you want to check on the vouchers? I didn't see anything. Cub checks them over